On Daf Tzadi Gimel Amid Aleph, we're by the two dots Hayorish Soimich. Today's daf is very, very easy, very pleasant, just mostly drushes. Run through it. Tani Rav Chananya Kamei de Rava. Now the Mishnah said that a Yorish, someone who takes over for his father, so his father passed away leaving a karban. So the Mishnah said the Yorish can do smicha, the son can do smicha in his father's stead, and the Yorish meimar, the son could also make a tmura. Tmura, you got it. A tmura means that you could try to transfer the kedusha. It's a lav, and the kedusha is now on both animals. Okay, but Kitzer, the Mishnah said that a Yorish can both do smicha and tmura. So Tani Rav Chananya, Kamei de Rava, Rav Chananya taught a brisa that's the opposite. The brisa says Yorish einoi soimich, Yorish einoi meimer. The exact opposite. That the Yorish cannot do smicha and the Yorish cannot do tmura. So for Hanan Tanan, so Rava said, but doesn't our Mishnah say the opposite? Ha Yorish soimich umaybe v'nisachasum umeimar. Our Mishnah says the exact opposite as this brisa. So Amalei Rav Chananya responded, Ibcha. So you want me to change the brisa? Meaning, should I change the brisa, or are we just going to say it's a machloikes? So, Amar lei, no, loi, don't change it. It's a machloikes. Masni san mani Rabbi Yehuda it's a machloikes between Tanoim. Our Mishnah, which says that a Yorish can do smicha and a Yorish can do tmura, is Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya, as the brisa says, Yorish meimar, Yorish soimich, Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Yorish einoi soimich, Yorish einoi meimer. So I'm sorry, the brisa that says that you cannot is Rabbi Yehuda. So that this brisa, Mamash speaks it out. It's a machlekes Tanoim. Our Mishnah follows the Tanakama that a Yorish can do smicha and a Yorish can do tmura, and Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says that they could do neither. So says the Gemara, what's the machlekes about? My time at Rabbi Yehuda. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say that a Yorish cannot do either? So he says like this. Regarding the smicha, it says karbano, which we had yesterday. There's three different drushes for karbano, because it says karbano three times. Rabbi Yehuda says karbano v'lo karbano aviv. Unlike yesterday, he says karbano v'lo karbano aviv. So the pasuk says that a Yorish cannot do smicha, because karbano, it has to be your carbon and not your dad's carbon. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, smicha's out. Now how do you know tmura's out? So Rabbi Yehuda rationalizes it like this. Tmura is the beginning of the hekdish process. It's beginning sanctification of an animal. I have an animal and I'm creating kedusha on it, so it's the beginning. Smicha is the end. Right before you shech the animal, you do smicha. So Rabbi Yehuda says very simple. If a Yorish can't do smicha, it stands to reason he can't do tmura. If he can't finish, he can't start. So Rabbi Yehuda, v'yolav tchilas hekdish m'soiv hekdish. Mas soiv hekdish Yorish and Esaimich, just like a Yorish cannot do smicha, av tchilas hekdish Yorish and a meimer, so you can't do tmura as well. So that's Rabbi Yehuda's shita. Rabbanon, they say no. How do I know that a Yorish can do smicha, can do tmura? The Rabbanon don't focus on smicha, they focus on tmura. Again, the basic presumption is if you're in for smicha, you're in for tmura. If you're in for tmura, you're in for smicha. It's beginning and end, so it's all together. So Rabbi Yehuda has a source that a Yorish cannot do smicha, so you can't do tmura. The Rabbanon have the opposite. They have a source that a Yorish can do tmura, and then once you could do tmura, you could do smicha. Rabbanon, homer yomer. Regarding tmura, there's an extra word, homer yomer. The double lashon is l'rabis as a Yorish. That a Yorish can do tmura. So once I know he could do tmura, so once I know you could do tmura, you could do smicha as well. So that's just machlekes and drushes. For Rabbanon, hi karbano ma'avidle. What do the Rabbanon do with karbano? Karbano is Rabbi Yehuda's source. Karbano v'lo karbanoviv. Karbano excludes a Yorish from being able to do smicha. What do the Rabbanon do with this? So this is what we had yesterday. Karbano, I think it says it three times. Karbano v'lo karbon over kachavim. First of all, karbano and not a guy's karbon, which means that if a guy sends a karbon to the Beis Hamikdash, he doesn't do smicha. By the way, it's pashut, he doesn't do smicha because it says Bnei Yisrael. But the real chiddush is that Bezdin doesn't do smicha for him. So karbano v'lo karbon guy. Number one. Number two, karbano v'lo karbon chavero. Karbano and v'lo karbon chavero means that you can never appoint a shliach, meaning Menachos has a carbon, but he's like, I'm not going to be able to make it. Be a shliach for me. Normally, shlucha shanu kamoisai, not for smicha. Karbano v'lo karbon chavero. And number three, karbano l'rabis kol ba'alei karbon l'smicha. And the third one is that if you have a carbon that has 5 partners, any partner can do smicha. We don't say that you have to own it entirely. Any partner in the animal can do smicha. Good. Now, so that's the three sources for the Rabbanon. That's what they do. The Rabbanon use the word karbano for those 3 times. It says karbano 3 times for these drushes. Rav Yehuda uses karbano to exclude a Yorish. So how does he know these halachas? L'Rabbas kol bali carbon l'smicha lesle. So the explanation is as follows. Out of those three, Rabbi Yehuda does not agree with the third. He does not believe that any partner can do it. He believes that you have to be the full ownership of the mitzvah in order to do it. So that one's out. So now instead of using all three, he has one extra, and that extra he uses to exclude a Yerush. Inami Islay, or perhaps he agrees with that drasha, so how does he get all the drashas in? He has 4 drashas for 3 words. The answer is, Karbano v'lo carbon chavero, and Karbano v'lo carbon over kachavim is basically saying the same thing. What's lo carbon over kachavim? A guy sends in the carbon into Bezdin. Bezdin doesn't do it for him. Why? Because you have to do it yourself. What's the other one? That you can't appoint a shliach. Why? Because you have to do it yourself. It's the same concept. Really, it could be. So Rabbi Yehuda says those 2 drushes can actually be learned from one word. So rendering an extra one free to exclude a Yerush. Yinami Islay, Ovikam Chaver Mechad Kran Nafka, Yatli Trikroi, Chad Karbanav, Karbanaviv, Aviidul Rabbis Kol Bar Karbon Smicha. Okay, very good. Rabbi Yehuda believes that a Yerush cannot do Tzmura. So what does he do with Hamer Yamer, which the Rabbanan said is to include a Yerush to do Tzmura? Hi Hamer Yamer Mayavidle, Miboy Le Rabbis as a Isha. His chiddush is of Hamer Yamer is that a woman could also do Tzmura, meaning don't think that Tzmura is something that only a male can accomplish. A woman can also create all the laws of Tzmura apply to women as well. Titania, as the Brisa says, and why would I think otherwise? Because the parsha is written in a masculine, so you might think that because there's nothing inherently masculine about Tzmura. I mean, conceptually, a woman should be able to create a Tzmura the same as a man. But the lashon of the psukim are all masculine; they're all male. So therefore, you might think Maaseh fein l'Rabbis Isha. So you might think that a woman is not included. Talmud Loimar Hamer Yamer. Hamer Yamer means the double lashon is to include women, and that's the Rabbi Yehuda does with that pasuk. The Rabbanon who believe that they use Hamer Yamer to include a Yerush. How do they know a woman is included? Me ve'im, the extra ve'im, and Rabbi Yehuda ve'im loy darash, and Rabbi Yehuda doesn't darash in ve'im. Okay, good. Mishnah Hakol Saimchen. Anyone can do smicha except Cheir Sheit v'Katan. They're out because they don't have das. Asuma, a blind person, as we'll see why. Oivik Kachav Magoy, Ha'eved, a Canaanite slave, because he's also not really Jewish. He's got the status of a woman in halacha. So Shliach, Ha'isha, a woman. Okay, good. Those most of them we've already covered, but we'll find sources for other. Another halacha. Smicha is shiare mitzvah. Smicha is extra. What do I mean shiare mitzvah? Shiare mitzvah is a terminology from the Mishnayos for it's l'chachila, meaning it's an important thing to do, but if you did not do smicha, you still it's shiarim. It's remnants. It's not essential. It's not ma'akiv. If you didn't do smicha, you still will get atonement. Okay, shiari mitzvah. Where do you do smicha? Al harosh b'shtei yadayim. You stand facing the animal and you lean on his head. You put both hands on his head, as Gemara will explain. Not the back, not the side of the head, not the neck, on the head. Ubemakam shesoimchin sheichtin, and the very place that the animal had smicha, you do shchita, meaning you don't move the animal, you don't delay. Why? The takeif l'smicha shchita. The Gemara is going to explain this statement is like a question answer. You do smicha in the same spot, meaning you don't take the animal away, you don't walk around. Why? Takeif l'smicha shchita, because the pasuk says there should be no delay, no hefsek between the smicha and the shchita, done right away. Okay, the Mishnah excluded many people from the process of smicha. Let's go through each one. I understand why a cheir devekatan can't do the mitzvah because they don't have das, and therefore because they don't have das, they're not able to perform this mitzvah, which requires machshava. This is not just a mitzvah of action. You're supposed to lean and you're supposed to do vidui. It's a process. They don't have das to do any of this stuff. Now, so they're out. A guy's out because there's Bnei Yisrael. Good. The only question is a blind person. Summa, my time alone. What's the source that a blind person cannot do smicha? Because there's no source in the pasuk you have to be able to see the animal. So the Gemara gives 2 explanations. Explanation number 1 is of Chizar Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi. Chad Amar Aisya smicha meziknei eda. The pasuk we talked about yesterday, that who does the smicha on, let's say, the par helm davar shel tzibur? It says the zakenim the members of the Sanhedrin. What was one of the halachas about the members of the Sanhedrin? They can't be blind. So because there's a reference of smicha with the zakenim, and the zakenim cannot be blind because that's a mum, so if you're blind, you can't do smicha. Okay. The second source, the other source is one of the karbanos that you do smicha is the oilas ria, by the regel. When you're oila regel, you have to bring an oilas ria, an oila. It's, by the way, one of the few oilas that are obligatory. So when you go oila regel, you have to bring an oila and you do smicha. One of the halachas is oila regel, is you only are chayiv in oila regel if you could see. Right? Yera'eh, you have to be able to see the Beis HaMikdash. If you're a summa, you're pater. So it's basically, we know there's smicha by an oilas ria. You're only chayiv in oilas ria if you could see. So if you're blind, you're out from both. Now the reason why that's a little bit of a shvach one is because, so I can't do smicha if I'm blind, because there is smicha by an oilas ria, and oilas ria you only do if you're not blind. There's no source. The pasuk never says outright by an oilas ria there's smicha. Based on drushes. So it's like, if the Torah would have said, do smicha by oilas ria, straight up, and I know you don't do oilas ria if you're blind, okay, but we actually don't. There's smicha by a regular carbon, and we make a drusha to include oilas ria. It's a little bit, it's a little bit removed, but okay, fine. The Gemara says, "Laman da'amar ma'ilas ria my tam eloyolef min ziknei eda." The opinion that says that we learn it out from the oilas ria. What was the issue with the first opinion? Why did he not like learning it out from the ziknei eda, which is that the pasuk says that the zakenim do smicha, and we know that the zakenim can't be blind. So what was the issue with that? That he had to have a different opinion. Go to the next page. Don in yachin me yachid bein don in yachim et tzibur, because he says like this: I'm an individual person. I want to do smicha on my animal. I happen to be blind. I'm excluded. Why? What's your source? Because of the zakenim doing smicha by the communal carbon, I want to stick with a source that's more for an individual, as opposed to a communal. That was the issue. And therefore he had to have a second opinion. Now, the issue, the opposite, is why did the first opinion not like the second opinion? The one who said from the zakenim, why did he not like oilas ria? And he mentions the issue that I mentioned before. The issue with oilas ria is there's no actual source in the Torah for smicha by oilas ria. It's learned out from a drasha. So to base it on oilas ria is a bit strange. Says the Gemara, "Laman di alf miziknei eda my tam el yalf oilas ria don in mid d'chsiv bei smicha begufe mid d'siv bei smicha begufe lafuka oilas ria di gufa oilas adavagamar." There is no source outright that an oilas ria has smicha. It's learned out from the fact that it's an oila and other oilas have smicha. So I'm not going to base it on oilas ria when that's not even the source. How do I know oilas ria has smicha b'chalal? Detani Tana Kameder of Yitzchak Bar Abba Vayikrav Esa Oila Vayasel Kamishbat Kamishbat Oilas Nadava Limit Oilas Chayva Shetuna Smicha. We know that the halacha is all oilas are the same. So because I know that a regular oila has smicha, therefore oilas ria also has smicha. But you understand, it's a bit outside the box. Let's keep going. The other three people that are excluded from smicha is a Canaanite slave, a shliach, and a woman. What's the source? The Tanur Rabbanan, it says regarding smicha, yado 3 times. So it says the Gemara, yado v'lo yad avdo, yado v'lo yad shlucho, yado v'lo yad ishto. So each one is excluding an eved, a shliach, and an isha. Now it says the Gemara, kol hani lamali. Why do I need all 3? Well, the Gemara is using the reference of his wife, but it's to include all women. The chiddush is the wife, meaning even though the wife is ishte kegufa, still she's out. Kal v'chomer, any woman. Point is though, it is an interesting point. Yeah. Now, so if you look at Taisus, my father is actually making a good point. Taisus points out that Taisus actually makes a good. Taisus speaks out that we're trying to find the source that women are out, and it says ishtoi. Ishtoi is not women. Women means a single girl shows up with a carbon, she doesn't do smicha. The source the Gemara is using is a wife. They're not necessarily the same. So Taisus says, it really says Bnei Yisrael. So women are already out. When the Mishnah says Isha, it means Ishtoi. And how do I know that a wife can't do smicha for her husband? So women are already, the Gemara is not really speaking out. Meaning a woman doesn't do smicha because it's Bnei Yisrael. So women are out. The Chiddush of the Mishnah, when it says Isha, it doesn't mean a random single girl shows up with the carbon. It means a husband shows up with his animal. So you might think that a woman his wife can do smicha, kamashmal, and she's out. Okay, interesting. Well, so the Gemara is going to speak out. And now the Gemara's question makes a lot of sense. Kol hani lamali, why do I need all three? Because they're all basically saying the same thing. I'm showing up with my animal, yeah? I show up with my animal and they're like, do you have time to do smicha? I'm like, I really got to run. They're like, well, what would you like to do? So I'm like, I'll send the shliach. They say, no, yado, he's out. I'll send my eved. No, yado, he's out. I'll send my wife. Yado, they're all out. They're all out because they're all saying the same thing. It doesn't work as a shliach. So it says the Gemara, why do I need all three? So the answer is each one is a bigger chiddush. Tzricha, ikas rachman achad. If it only said one, hava meinel muti eved, I would exclude a slave to la bar mitzvahs. I would say the reason why a slave can't do it is because they're not fully Jewish. Aval shliach de bar mitzvahu b'shluchashan l'kamaisa emelismach. But I would say if I only had one source, I would say yeah, an eved's out because he's not a full Jew, but a full Jew can be a shliach to do smicha. That's why you need the second one. And if you had two, I would say delav kugufa damya. Aval ishta de kugufa damya ema tismach. If I only had two, I would say yeah, a shliach's out because shluch hashadim kumayis is not strong enough. But ishta kugufa, she should be able to do smicha on behalf of the husband. Kamash one, all three are out. Good. Smicha shiare mitzvah. We said that smicha is not essential, which means that if you do not do smicha, you're yoytze b'diavad. How do I know this? The Tan Rabbanan, v'samach, it says you do smicha, then it says v'nirtza. V'nirtza means you gain atonement. Now the problem is, it's in the same pasuk. The problem is, that implies that the atonement is from the smicha. The atonement is not from the smicha. I think we've been doing kachim long enough, probably about a year now. We've been doing kachim long enough to know that the atonement is from the blood. So it says the Gemara, v'chi smicha mechaperes, halein kapara lo bedam. So why does the pasuk equate the kapara with the smicha? So it says the Gemara, shenameki adam ha'nafesh yichaper, elo loy melach, it's to teach you. Im asa l'smicha shiari mitzvah. If you do not do smicha, it's ma'ila b'kosav ki'ilu loy kippur v'kippur. Hashem is saying, you do gain atonement, v'nirtza, but you're missing something. So the pasuk is putting the smicha in the same pasuk of the atonement to say, if you want the full atonement, l'chachila hider, you need to do the smicha. If you don't do smicha, you'll still get the atonement because the atonement is really contingent on the blood, but you're missing something. There's some aspect that you're missing. Now, so we're saying that the smicha is not ma'akiv, but it's a hider. It's l'chachila. Says the Gemara, "B'tanya gabi tnufa kai gavno." We find the same thing by the waving. L'tnufa l'chaper, same drasha. It says l'chaper by the tnufa. We know that the waving is not essential for the kapar. The kapar is the blood. The answer is the same thing. If you don't wave the parts of the carbon you're supposed to wave, you're missing in that atonement, but you get an atonement. Meaning, b'diavad yaitza. V'chi tnufa mechaper is leim chaper lo adam. Shenem kedam mechaper. Eloi melach shem asal tnufa shiarei mitzvah ma'adav v'kasach ki lo kiper v'kiper. Good. Then the Mishnah said, where do you do smicha al harosh? Tan Rabbanan yodoi al harosh. You do smicha on the head, v'loy al yedei tzavor, and not on the animal's neck. Yodoi al rosh v'loy yedei agabayim, and not on the animal's back. Yodoi rosh v'loy yedei chaza, and not on the animal's chest. I don't know, you just like get under there. I don't know. So the point is, it has to be on the head, not the neck, not the back, not the chest. Why do I need all three? Just tell me it's on the head, and I'll be able to figure out. Kol hani lamli. I need Yado 3 times to exclude Yado al Arosh to exclude these three. Just tell me on the head. I'll know everything else. The answer is Strichi. Ikasar Achman Achad. If the pasuk had only said al Arosh once, I would say Lamute Tzavar. I would say the neck is out. Deloy Kabadi Rosh. Because when an animal's when they're standing, their bodies are flat. The neck is under it. So I would say you're supposed to do the head. But if I only had one exclusion, I'd say the neck is out because the neck is lower. But the back, which is on the same level of the head, maybe you could do the back. It's on the same angle as the head. No, but it says Yod al Rosh. If I only had one, I would say the Rosh is to exclude the neck. But the back, it's on the same level as the head. Maybe Yotze b'diavad. Then it said a second time, Aval gab the koy by the rosh malo. Tzrichi v'yishmin nitarti, and if it said twice, mishum lo yisrael l'tnufa. Aval chaza the yisrael l'tnufa imaloy tzricha. And if it only said it twice, I would say, yeah, the back is out and the neck is out, but the breast, the chest, which is part of the waving process, maybe because it's part of the waving process, you could do smicha on that. Kamash malan, 3 times, all parts are out. It has to be on the head. It says ala rosh 3 times, 1 to exclude the neck, 1 to exclude the back, 1 to exclude the chest. If it only said it once, I would only exclude the neck because it's lower in the animal, but the back, which is on the same height as the head, maybe it's yaisa. And if I said twice, I would just say it's to exclude the back and to exclude the neck, but the chest, which is part of the waving process, maybe because it's part of the waving process, you could do smicha on there. Kamashmal, and all 3 are telling you no. Then the Gemara says, Iboilu avakasha, yadu al tzadin. What about the side of the head? Like the face. If you lean on the face. Mahu, what's the halacha? No, standing. So you're supposed to go straight forehead. What if I lean on the side of his head? So, Tashma, Detanya, Abba, Bira, Barav Elazar ben Yaakov Omer. Yadai al harosh, v'lo yada tzadin. Head is no good. Side is no good. It's got to be front facing, not the side. Boy Rav Yirmiyah, matlis mahu, shetachutz. What if the kohen or the owner puts a handkerchief? He doesn't like to touch animals. They're ichi. So he puts a handkerchief between his hands and the animal. Is it a problem of chatzitza? Is there any source that you can't have a chatzitza? So, Tashima, the Brisa says outright, there can be nothing between your hands and the animal. The hands must be directly on the animal, no handkerchief in between. Ubishtei yadayim. And this will take us to the end of the daf. B'shtei yadayim, we'll get to the mission that will stop. B'shtei yadayim means that you have to use both hands. How do you know that you're supposed to use both hands? So the actual source, Menani Mili, Amrei Shlakish, Damar Kra. The pasuk says regarding the La'azazel goat, it says that the Kohen Gadol, it says Yod. Now, okay, forget about how you could read it. It's Yud Dalid Vav. Yud Dalid Vav in Hebrew is Yado, singular. V'samach es shtei Yado. So obviously, that doesn't make sense. 2 singular. So by the way, so we read it as Yadav, but it's written singular. Why would the pasuk write it singular and say shtei? You know what the answer is? It's to tell you ksiv Yado. It's written singular with one with Yud Daled Vav, which is singular. Uksiv shtei, but it says 2. So how do you reconcile that? It's to tell you Zebana Av. It's to tell you a rule. Kol makom shenemar Yado harei kan shtayim. Achiv v'chaz avachas. It's to tell you a rule throughout Kol HaTorah Kula. Whenever it says Yud Daled Vav, it means 2. Shtei Yado means Yud Dalet Shtei is telling you the word Yado is always Shtei. So whenever it says hand, it means 2. So okay, so when it says Smicha, even if it says singular hand, it means both hands. Here's the question though. If that's the case, then why does the pasuk ever say 2 hands? You should never need the word Yadav, Yud Dalet Yud Vav, which is plural. If you're telling me Yud Dalet Vav means 2, there's no need Kol HaTorah Kula to have 2 hands, because 1 hand means 2 hands. So this statement was Rish Lakish. It's interesting back and forth, very interesting back and forth. Also, it shows you we all know this because you're dealing with Amirayim, so you're very, very nervous to describe them in human terms. Rish Lakish is a very fiery person. I think that's a safe assessment. It's interesting this back and forth. Rish Lakish is the one who said this chiddush, that the word Yado, Shtei Yado, tells you Yud Dalet Vav always means 2. Anytime there's a reference to hand, it means 2. That's Rish Lakish talking. So Azul Rav Elazar, Amr Hashmaitim Bein Midrash, Rav Elazar went to the base medrash, said this teaching, V'lo Amr B'Shem Rish Lakish, but did not quote Rish Lakish. Now, the simple reading of this Gemara is he chose not to quote Rish Lakish. Some of Harshim I saw, they say, it doesn't mean he was Mechavan himself. So he didn't feel the need to quote Rish Lakish because he had his own. So he's saying the statement of Rish Lakish. But because he's not giving Rish Lakish credit, Rish Lakish gets upset. So says the Gemara, Shamar Rish Lakish of Ikbid. Rish Lakish hears that he's not quoted and he gets upset. So you know what Rish Lakish does? He has kashas on his own vart to sort of shut up Rav Elazar, to sort of quiet Rav Elazar. Rav Elazar quoted his same Yesod and he starts ripping it apart, which is interesting. So he says, he asked Rav Elazar the question, Isal Gadaytach Al-Hecha D'Chsiv Yadav, Tarti Ninu, Lama Lemechtav Yadav Yadav. Actually, Asr Ma'ar B'Yadav. Yadav Tivyenu, Yadav Ravloi, Shikalas Yadav. He asked Rish Lakish said to Rav Elazar a kash on his own word, which is, if you're telling me there's a rule now for a binyan av that the word Yud Daled Vav, which is singular, always means two. So every time there's a reference in the Torah to hands, it means two. So why does the pasuk ever say two hands? Yadav Ravlo, Yadav with a Yud is two hands. Yadav Shikalas Yadav, Yaakovinu switches hands. Why does the pasuk ever say hands? If every hand means hands, there's no need to say hands. So it's a kash on his own word. Yeah, exactly. It would be no. So it says the Gemara Ishtik. Rav Elazar was quiet. So and then Rish Lakish walks away. So Lebasar Dinach Daite. After Rish Lakish calmed down, he said, "All right." He said, "Now let's talk." My time He said, Rish Lakish said, "Why didn't you answer me? Yadav de Smicha Ka'amri." That this rule that a singular hand means two is not for Kol HaTorah Kula. It's dafka for the context of which we're talking about, smicha. So the fact that the Torah uses two hands for other contexts, Yaakov Avinu and other concepts, is irrelevant. I'm talking about dafka smicha. Why didn't you respond that way? So says the Gemara, "B'smicha nami ksivi yismechas yadav alav yetzaveyu." He says because even within smicha it says plural hands, yadav with a yud. So the vart doesn't even work within smicha. If you're telling me that every time it says hand within smicha, it means hands, but we find within the word smicha, within the topic of smicha, it says hands. So so Rish Lakish responded, smicha de behema kama. Yeah, but smicha by an animal. That's smicha by a person. That was being saimich Yeshua. Smicha by an animal. So therefore, the point is, so the vart does work. Within smicha by animals, we have a rule that anytime it says singular, it means plural. We usually don't do that. I know, it's like a couple times. It's like 3 or 4 times. I don't know, it's a strange thing. Let's just finish up. You're not allowed to move the animal around. My time, as I said when we did the Mishnah, why is this? You have to do smicha exactly where the animal was. You have to shech right away. Why? You should take a smicha shchita, because you're not supposed to make any hefsek between the smicha and the shchita. So if you can't move the animal away, because that would be a hefsek. All right, we'll stop here.
Is in your face.